It's sunny in mid-Michigan. We'll give everyone a moment to just get joined and get settled. See people still filing in. Okay. It looks like we are recording and it is 1 o'clock, so we'll get rolling. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar to inform us all about opportunities related to preschool inclusion. I'm Christy Callahan. I'm Director of the Office of Innovative Projects, and we're very pleased to partner with the Michigan Department of Education on this preschool development grant birth through 5 funded initiative. Michigan was one of only a few states to be fortunate enough to receive this funding, and we have some great innovative work underway, and we're going to share a particular opportunity related to supporting preschool inclusion this afternoon. And on our agenda for today, we'll introduce ourselves as your project team, give a little bit of background about the work that's been happening in Michigan, and then some information on the program requirements for this application process. And we'll go over that as an overview and provide instructions for applying and timelines, and we'll be able to answer questions as they come up. Please use the chat for your questions. We'll review them as you submit them, and if we know that we'll be covering them later in the presentation, we'll probably hold it. But if we see that, oh, we need to address that, we'll do that on the spot. And then there should be time at the end for an open Q&A as well. So we'll get rolling.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again for joining. I'm Lisa Wazak in the Michigan Department of Education, the Office of Great Start, and I'm the 619 Coordinator for Preschool Special Ed. Joy Milano is our grant manager for the Preschool Development Grant Funds and the Birth Through 5 initiative. And she's on this slide, and we work in conjunction with her.
Thank you, Lisa. You're freezing up a little bit. We'll move on to the introductions of the rest of our project team from our Office of Innovative Projects. I've introduced myself as Christy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nancy Subert-Goins. I'm the Training and Technical Assistance Manager here.
Hello, I'm Carrie Holmberg. I'm the CC RESA Project Manager for the PDG Birth Through 5 funded initiatives.
Hi, I'm Gary Schaefer. I'm Finance Manager for the Office of Innovative Projects. I'll be your friendly neighborhood payment man when the time comes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark Kuipers, and I'm the Preschool Special Education Content Specialist, and I am just incredibly excited about this opportunity that we can talk with you today about.
And hi, everyone. I'm Sophia D'Agostino. I am the practice-based coaching content expert. I am an assistant professor at Hope College, and I teach early childhood and special education. And I have an area of focus and interest on inclusion and coaching and training pre-service and in-service teachers.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Sophia. So we're really happy to work together to get this rolling. So
go ahead, Christy.
Sorry, I was just going to say what I think I said earlier. The project is possible through the Preschool Development Grant Birth Through 5 initiative. And we're very glad to be a partner with the Department of Education in this work. And Lisa was supposed to take those 2 slides. Sorry, I mean those 2 bullets, and I just talked over her. And so know that we are administrators of this work, and we'll be acting on their behalf. And so all payments and reimbursements for the work will flow through our business office. You just heard Gary introduce himself, and we'll be providing program oversight, training and technical assistance. We'll have some reporting requirements, and we'll be monitoring the work as well. Sorry, Lisa.
So we want to give you a little bit of background about why Michigan and why this initiative. And many of you may be familiar with some of the information we'll go over on this slide, but just so that we're all on the same page, these are conversations we've been having across the state with many of you. But inclusion, as we all know, has a regulatory background, and that any child who has a disability is always entitled to their least restrictive environment. So based upon that, we of course looked at the research and know that the research supports inclusion at a 15-to-1 ratio. Children with disabilities have better social skills, they have better acquisition and retention of skills. All the peers in the classroom that is inclusive have better social emotional development and empathy. And inclusive classrooms overall tend to have higher quality for all learners. So as we looked at that, certainly that's motivation for all of us to do work in this area. And then we reflect back upon Michigan's data currently. And I think that's what gives us additional impetus in this area. We most recently had an inclusion rate of just a little over 28%. Those are children with disabilities in typical settings. And to put a little bit more granular view on that, we actually did not meet our target. So Michigan is not meeting, or this last year did not meet its target for inclusion. And we are in the bottom 10 states for preschool inclusion. The average rate of inclusion is about 45%. So as you look at the regulations, the research, and the data, I think all of us feel like, well, this is the time, this is the right work to do. So we just wanted to bring you up to speed on that, and any questions, we can certainly talk about that, but we'll move on at this point. So those that are eligible for this grant are intermediate school districts. And as a whole, you would turn in a district-wide ISD plan. So we'd like to talk a little bit about what that scope of work looks like. And some of you that may have some of this information already know that we are going to base a lot of this work on practice-based coaching. In fact, it's the backbone of the work we're going to do. Everything that we know about systems change indicates that practice-based coaching is the way to do it. So that will be included in your district-wide plan as you submit it to us. The other piece that is in there, and I think a lot of people are curious and excited about this, is the preschool inclusion and equity support specialist. That's actually an FTE or position that we're asking people to hire for. We're saying that for this work to be done, we need this to be the work of an individual who actually pushes forward the work of inclusion and equity. Those two pieces we know are pretty intertwined, and so that person would cover both of those pieces. We'll talk more about the FTE and the funding behind that further on. And then the last part of the district-wide plan would include the participation of district personnel in things that we know are evidence-based practices, including the ICP, which is the Inclusive Classroom Profile, and the pyramid model for supporting children with social emotional competence. So those are two things that you may be familiar with. If you are not, I'd suggest that you take a look at those as you move forward with writing out a district-wide plan. Those are going to be, as we said, those three pieces, as you look at them, are going to be backbones of any district-wide plan that you would submit. Right? So we can go on from there. I think this is Lisa, correct?
So I will say to the group that I know I have some technical issues on my end. So if I freeze up, Mark will take over. Our project components for this is there will be a component that requires training. It'll be training of the inclusion specialist and equity specialist that Mark was just talking about. Training that we'll be going through. As a whole group, the ISDs that are awarded this grant opportunity, as well as those at the state level, as well as those at CC RISA Office of Innovative Projects. Mark just talked about it, and I've also referenced it above with the training, is the hiring of a point of, at some point it will vary, but to start with, a full FTE that will support the position of a preschool inclusion and equity support specialist. There'll be implementation of the statewide ISD approved plan that is submitted in the RFP, and implementation of practice-based coaching that will, in different other various pieces that are evidence-based that we decide that we already know that will be part of this, that will be moving forward through implementation of that within the ISD and districts. There will be a coaching component to this. and mentoring. That is a big role of the preschool inclusion and equity support specialist, is coaching and mentoring within the classroom teachers and OTPT SLPs. And the list can go on from there. And then really what the leadership role would be in that ISD as this work moves forward. We're looking at piloting work, and ideally in my utopian society, how I envision this going is we'll have the leadership roles within each ISD within this RFP, but after this grant opportunity expires, there'll be a systematic approach, a change that has happened in that ISD through the leadership of the individuals that are writing for this grant, as well as this preschool inclusion and equity support specialist moving forward. So again, we're looking for a systematic change to approach inclusion, not just something that's going to be a 3-year one and done type of thing. As we move on to performance measures, as with any grant, there's always an expectation. If there's money attached to it, there's going to be ways in how success or achievement is evaluated. One thing that we'll be looking for is that this preschool inclusion and equity support specialist is filled with a qualified candidate. And we actually have an RFP. We have a position description that we have worked diligently on to outline what this qualified candidate's skill set and expertise in education should look like. The other piece of the performance measures is looking at the training and implementation and coaching components that are implemented and with fidelity. And again, everything that we're looking at putting into this project, into this RFP group everything is evidence-based, research-based, and it's taking what we're doing through the training, the implementation of the inclusion pieces and coaching and seeing that they truly are implemented with fidelity. There's going to be an expectation that the awarded ISDs will be have full participation in something we call the Inclusion Builders Work Group. Again, inclusion is not a new thing, but in Michigan, we're kind of approaching it from a very different way this time to actually try to move not just the needle, but have a systematic approach change when it comes to inclusion and looking at placements for children with IEPs ages 3 through 5. And then there'll be a program evaluation. When we talk about inclusion, it seems, well, why wouldn't we just look at our indicator B6 data, which is our ed environments ages 3 through 5. And that will be one of the things that we will look at. But we also know that indicator is only collected every fall, and it's only collected one time a year. And so when we look at when that data is collected and when we see the data, there's a big lag in that. And we also know that true change takes 3 to 5 years. So we don't want B6 indicator data just to be a sole resource of what we're looking at. We'll be looking at the inclusive classroom profile, which is a classroom assessment tool that is used in a general ed setting where there's at least 2 children, at least 1 child, but ideally 2 or more children with IEPs that are receiving their services in that classroom. And then as we move forward with our research over this process, things are always continuing to change. So we left program evaluation kind of vague because we'll determine, okay, what else is relevant to look at in addition to the ICP and in addition to having the B6 data. I will invite Mark, is there anything on performance measures you would like to add?
The only thing, and I think you've hit on it really well also, Lisa, is just the fact that as you can tell by our conversation, we're not just looking at increasing the number of children included in inclusive settings, but that being done in a way that is evidence-based and is meaningful inclusion. So hence the inclusion of the ICP and some other pieces that say it's not just moving children to an inclusive setting, it's making sure their needs are being met in that setting. So modeling good inclusion for children that have disabilities.
Thanks, Mark. The next piece that I'll talk about, and my last piece I'll cover before I hand it over to Gary to talk about the funding, is really the expectation of our milestones and deliverables. There is an expectation for participation in all Inclusion Builders workshops, meetings. Currently, those have been happening as we talk about the Inclusion Builders, we think about monthly meetings. August 18th of 2020 was the first state level inclusion meeting that happened. One thing that we haven't talked about on this webinar to date, but you may have heard it from other webinars that Mark and I have done, is that Michigan is one of 5 states that has applied for and was well, there's many more states, but we were one of 5 that was awarded a national TA for focusing on inclusion, and it's an intensive TA opportunity, working with national TA Kathy Whaley, Penny Dell, and Katasha Williams. And it's helping to help Michigan kind of, again, look from the sides, top, bottom, to kind of really turn inclusion and our approach to inclusion on its head to try to make a systematic change statewide. One of the things within that was the requirement that Michigan, or the states that were awarded this opportunity, to have a state level leadership team. And so as everything we have in education has an acronym, so it's the SLT team. And that first meeting just happened on August 18th, with the next one scheduled for September 30th. Those further meetings haven't been planned yet, because we know these RFPs are going out, but these will be, again, monthly or maybe every couple of weeks types of meetings that will be an expectation. We are expecting that the preschool inclusion and equity support specialists will start in their position by December of 2020. And I also realize it's mid-September, but as you know, with any opportunity for grant monies, sometimes well, not sometimes, most of the time, it takes a little bit longer to actually get your hands on the source to be able to make it move forward, specifically the money piece. The third piece of the milestone and deliverables and expectations is that this person, so again, when we talk about the statewide or the ISD plan, it's really kind of making sure that these things are considered as you roll out and develop your plan. It's looking at this person that's hired in for the inclusion and equity support specialist attends the training and technical assistance meetings. We're also looking at the pyramid model for supporting social emotional competence in young children meetings, which happens in April. Last year it was delayed, was canceled due to COVID. This April, it looks like it's on track to happen in person. There is an early childhood inclusion institute that typically happens in May, and then other opportunities as available, such as the Division for Early Childhood National Conference and any statewide conferences that we see. The other verbal expectation is that submission of all budgets, progress reports, and data are in accordance with the project and their timelines. And as we talk about budgets, I'll segue over to Gary to talk about the funding.
Hello, everyone. The intent is to give out awards of $160,198, with $68,656 going out in the first year or cycle, and the same amount in the second cycle. And in the last one, $22,885, which will end on December 2022. The reason it's ending in December of 2022 is because that's when the funding to MDE ends with the PDG program. This should allow for you to fund a preschool inclusion specialist. The first cycle is going to start as soon as awards are made and you get a person hired, and probably, like Lisa said, not till December, but we're hoping as early as possible at the end of this year. There will be 10% allowed on this for administrative costs for your ISD. As you see in the right-hand column, that CC RESA OIP, we're going to provide a commitment of support for national training and conferences and statewide professional learning opportunities as allowed by the PDG funds. That support will flow through us. This is going to run with the school fiscal year. So this first award will end June 2021. And I know we're starting late, and so the question of carryover has come up. We think carryover may be allowed, but we will let you know at a later date if that's for a certainty. The second year is July 21 through June of 22. And this is where you're supposed to start contributing some of the cost for your inclusion specialists. The idea is that when this program is all done, that you will be able to maintain and retain the person you have hired. We can go to the next slide. Like I said before, the fiscal year is July 1 through June 30th. You can start invoicing. The first invoice you can submit is in January. We'll be providing you a form and an Excel spreadsheet that you can invoice us for. It is to be on actual costs incurred. And right now, the only documentation we will ask for is a general ledger summary that aligns with your expenses. After that, we would like you to bill at least quarterly. If not quarterly, you can bill monthly or bi-monthly. The initial program budget is due January 8th, 2021. Those will be reviewed, and if there's any amendments to that, we will go back and forth with you until that's finalized. There will be a final expenditure report on this, and they will be due the end of August of 2021 at the end of the first grant year. But the invoices that we'll be providing for you in an Excel summary will be based off of your budget that you submitted. So you will kind of be doing an expenditure report as you go along. Payments, when you submit a request for payment, you will get it within 30 days, sometimes normally a lot shorter, but we're giving ourselves a 30-day window, so you can be impressed when it comes sooner. And I think that's all I have on that.
Thanks, Gary. The announcement went out yesterday to the field for our RFP and attached on our CC RISA OIP website. If you click on Preschool Special Education tab and then click on News, you will find the announcement for the request for application and all of the pertinent documents that you will need to walk you right through the steps of knowing exactly what the RFP is, what we're explaining today in the PowerPoint with our webinar, and talking about the background, the scope of work, the program deliverables, milestones, all the components are available right on our website, and I'm going to drop in a link here for you all. And you'll be able to print out the RFP. You'll be able to also print out the Word document of the Preschool Inclusion and Equity Support Project application. And within that application, you're going to fill out in a Word format the background, your statement of interest, and then the ISD program plan, which has all these components that we talked about earlier today, about the training component, the preschool inclusion and equity support specialist component, the implementation component, coaching, leadership, and then finally the budget. And it all is spelled out in the application for what you need to provide for your application. As well as in the RFP itself, we do have the scoring rubric available so that you are able to see how applications will be scored by our review committee using the rubric that's attached in the RFP. The deadline for this application is by 4 o'clock on October 6th. I know this is a quick turnaround, but we're hoping to get successful applicants completed and submitted to us no later, again, by 4 o'clock on October 6th. So if you can have all your full responses in the application as a PDF and to email to me, I'll drop my email in here as well. That way we can have receipt of your application and let you know the process going forward.
Thank you, Carrie. So just to give a little information about the decision-making process, the proposals will be reviewed to determine that all the required elements are in the proposals. And then we will use the scoring rubric that Carrie just talked about and determine readiness of each ISD that applies. So really, your application helps us determine whether you are at a place of readiness to implement this particular program, including the high-quality preschool inclusion and equity support position and everything that goes along with that. Proposals will be grouped by characteristic, and we'll need to make sure that we have a diverse and balanced population for this work. And the highest rated proposals will be the ones that we consider for the awards. And we have a maximum of 7 awards that will be made. We'll be making those announcements as soon as we review the applications, and the review process will be done by some people within our office as well as some people outside. So we'll have a nice, well-rounded team of people reviewing all of the applications that come in. Team, did I forget anything on that?
Nope, I think you're good.
Say, hearing nothing, I'm going to go on to the next slide. Carrie?
Yep. So if you are thinking or questions pop up in your application process, feel free to shoot me an email so that we can get it to our implementation team and best meet your answers and get what you need in order to complete the process of the application. If you need a copy of the PowerPoint today and you did not receive that in an email, feel free to email me and I can send you out the PowerPoint handout for today as well. We will be recording, we are recording this, and we'll have this meeting uploaded on our CC RISA OIP website. Again, it will be under the preschool special education tab, and we'll have that included within our news with this project so that you can come back and refer to anything that was pertinent information here. So just feel free to contact me and let me know if you have any inquiries. Here's our timeline, what you can expect in this application process. Again, I mentioned we sent out the announcement to the whole field yesterday. We have our webinar today. Applications are due by 4 o'clock to me electronically by April. Wouldn't that be nice? October 6th of this year. And then we will have our review committee score each application with our scoring rubric. And we will take our recommendations to the CC RISA board on November 2nd for approval. And we'll be notifying applicants of acceptance on November 3rd of this year. And we'll be having all contracts signed by November 15th. So that's our timeline going forward on this project.
So Carrie, we've got one question in the chat box. Do we need to let you know we will be applying, or just go ahead and submit a proposal by the due date? Carrie, do you want a heads up that people are considering applying?
That would be fantastic. I know we're doing that for the Strong Beginnings application piece. So that, yes, that would be really beneficial, Krenda. If you or anybody on this call can just email me interest email of your intent to apply for this would be wonderful, so that we can have a heads up that you'll be submitting the application. Thank you, Krenda.
And like the Strong Beginnings notice of intent, it doesn't bind you to applying. It's just letting us know that you're thinking about it. And so, Carrie, do you happen to recall the deadline for that?
September 25th.
Okay, so if you could issue those letters of intent or emails of intent to Carrie by September 25th, that would be really helpful.
Great, thank you. And we'll just open it up to questions at this time. If you, if anything has popped in to your thinking realm and have something to ask our implementation team, feel free to drop it in the chat.
And since we're not really overwhelmed with questions, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. So a question, how many staff and students do we anticipate one preschool inclusion support and equity support specialist would support. Mark and Lisa, do you have?
Mark, you're muted. And
We think that may vary a little bit from district to district because as indicated, we are trying to get a, I guess I'll call it a cross-sector representation of ISDs. And they may be at different places with the whole inclusive process. I think that may be part of your proposal as well, to say this is how many people we think they can support. I would say around 3 to 5 classrooms is going to be probably the top. But we are looking for that to be rolled out in a more systematic way as time goes on. But as these people are being coached to those effective practices, we want to keep their work within the realm of what we would consider to be reasonable. Does that make sense?
And that is in the application. If you take a look at it, that does say that it's really individualized per your ISD, but needs to be included in your plan.
Mm-hmm.
And as Mark said, it's about the rolling out of how this looks. It's not expected that there would be 5 classrooms all at once. If it makes sense to start out with 2 to get a handle to, as we're going and building the resources, building the training, then going into 3 classrooms, but again, looking to not exceed 5. So there's a lot of intentional thinking to do on the ISD's end to think about how this could look, how to utilize this person in their position. And if you have something that's already similar in the works now, how that can be morphed to incorporate more of what we're looking for, to be whole-rounded and holistic.
I think Alyssa's comment in chat is more for those thinking about applying, but I'm going to read it off anyway. I would be interested in hearing how other ISDs would assume funding. Where is budget flexibility? If you're willing to share, email me. So,
Thanks, Alyssa.
I have a question that maybe everyone else already gets, but what classrooms are you actually thinking of? Are you thinking of typical classrooms and increasing the number of kids with IEPs in there and supporting typical teachers in that process? Or could this also be done with, yeah, I mean, I guess if you're talking 3 to 5 year olds, you're basically talking like GSRP and Head Start type classrooms who then are trying to include IEP kids. Or where do ECDD classrooms fit? What are you all thinking?
So when we look about inclusion, it's about children with IEPs in the general ed setting receiving at least half of their special education services in that general ed classroom. So yes, it would be Head Start, GSRP, but also community-based programs on private child cares, private preschools, really thinking about within your area, thinking outside of the box. This is something else with this grant opportunity, this RFP. It's not the tried and true, it's the how can we do things differently? How can we approach this in a way that hasn't been approached before? So, and I'm just saying Brenda because she's the one who asked the question, and this goes to everybody, but the one thing, Brenda, with this particular, with our indicator B6, and what is identified as inclusion by at the federal level, it's, again, you have at least your child with a special need with an IEP is in a classroom receiving at least half of their special ed services in that classroom. In Michigan, we have children in the classroom receiving embedded services, but we also have about 17 to 19% statewide that are in the general ed classroom not receiving embedded services, that are still getting pulled out or coming to the ISD or the LEA on a day that they're not in Head Start or GSRP. So thinking really how to move the needle, not just about the numbers piece, but how to truly think about incorporating embedded services. So it's not just going to be your gen ed teachers. It's absolutely going to be working with your specialists and your therapists to think outside the box on how to make inclusion work in that area. Does that help?
So helpful. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, you're welcome.
So Leanne has responded to Alyssa in our chat, just saying this would be our concern with the impending per pupil cuts at the state level. That's a bit of a tongue twister, but you're absolutely right, Leanne, that is something everyone needs to think about.
we know this is an unprecedented time, and this, when Michigan first applied for this TA opportunity in the PDG funds, this was December of 2019, before this pandemic ever hit us. And that's why the state leadership team did not meet for the first time until August 18th, because trying to rethink how is this all going to work, and then trying to figure out what the PDG birth to 5, what's our scope of work going to look like now? Because a big thing we were planning on doing is attending some trainings along this way that didn't happen. And I'll tell you, for those of you who know me, know I'm all about transparency. That's one of the reasons why this first year of this inclusion equity specialist will be funded at a full FTE, is because we didn't have the opportunity to utilize funds as we had planned to for year 1 of the PDG birth to 5 grant. And so originally when we had envisioned this, we thought this position would be funded all 3 years at a 0.5 FTE. And if you notice how that breakdown was, it was doing a full FTE for year 1, a 0.75 for year 2, with the ISD covering the other quarter of the FTE, and then the year 3 doing a 50-50, 0.5. That way, you know, it's kind of, and also with your budgets, you can then start planning for 3 years from now, how to kind of, again, because we don't want this position to go away. We're looking, again, for that systematic change. How can we keep this position? How do we need to think outside the box a little bit more, even when it comes to continuing funding this position?
I have a question.
Yes, Elaine.
So you mentioned that the person who holds this position would go through ICP training and attend national conferences and those kinds of things. Would they also go through practice-based coaching training, and would the intent of the ICP and these other trainings be to train other people within the ISD programs so that they're skilled with, I'm thinking Oakland County is a large or large ISD compared to smaller ones that, you know, if you have this person trained in the ICP, they may feasibly be able to go out and do the evaluation themselves, whereas in Oakland County, we've got so many, we would have to train other people in how to implement that assessment. Does that sound like I'm on the right track?
Absolutely, you want to build capacity. So not only is it these ISDs getting trained in the use of the ICP, and I'll just use that as an example, or practice-based coaching, it is then them becoming trainers in that to the efficacy that Mark, myself, Jory, and Sophia are for the ICP, that they can go back throughout their ISD and then continue to train others to utilize the tool. That way all the weight's not falling on one person. Same thing with the practice-based coaching. In a lot of these conferences, a lot of these opportunities for training are outside of the state. And I do know there's some ISDs and LEAs that have restrictions on out-of-state travel, even if it's a third-party pay. So these are intentional conversations to be having before this RFP is due October 6th, to see, okay, because once we sign on, there is, I'm hoping we're really clear in our expectations of milestones and deliverables that we're expecting out of this person being funded. And it's truly that they can get the training in all the aspects that we envision to then go back to their districts to then start training and building capacity within their own ISD.
So is it correct to assume that the training or the cost of the training for the ICP, because I know that can be expensive, that is going to be covered by this grant? That's not a, okay.
Yes, the training of any out-of-state travel, as well as the training for the conferences or the attending of conferences, that is all going to be part of the grant as a third-party pay. Again, I do know that still is a hiccup for some districts. The piece that we're looking at is really thinking about this, because this RFP is not just about hiring in or building support for a preschool equity inclusion specialist. It's truly, it's well-rounded. But those conferences and trainings and materials would be paid for.
Awesome.
Great question, thank you. What other questions are on your minds, ladies and gentlemen? As Mark said when he introduced himself, I can't tell you how excited I am for this opportunity. There's many times I think about inclusion and things that I would like to have happen in Michigan. And typically you just kind of get tied up in the red tape and funds not being available. And for this to actually get to the process to the point where it is in the process, I'm beyond excited that this is actually something that's going to take footing and take hold, and we have money to back it up. So quite excited about this opportunity for everybody.
I have to say, just chime in there, Lisa, that I am equally excited about this as well, because when I've thought about the need for support for inclusion in my ISD, this is exactly what I was thinking, is that we need somebody who can be that support person, and that would be their focus, to be able to provide this kind of support, and not just to special ed staff, but to general education staff too. And for me, in my position, there's so much work to be done in my county that there's no way that I could effectively take this on all by myself. So to have somebody that that this would be their main focus, that I could help support, as well, I think we could really make a lot of progress.
Absolutely. And again, it's about that out of the box thinking. In the chat that Alyssa sent to everyone, in case you don't have your chat open, she has made a comment: is anyone else interested in pairing this with a Strong Beginnings application? I love the idea of supported threes preschool. So in case you haven't opened up your chat, it's there. And if you'd like to open it up and respond back to Alyssa, you're welcome to, or chime in on the call.
I think that's really exciting that that would even come up in our chat, because I think as we were starting to think about some of this, we actually had that comment. What would happen if somebody actually applied for Strong Beginnings and the inclusion and melded those two together? It's just, I think all of us that are doing this work are very excited by not only the prospect of that, but also looking at inclusion at so many different levels that we're talking about. How does it happen at the grassroots level, at the ISD level, at the state level, and really looking to address this in a systemic way. And that's our hope. And we certainly know that the pandemic piece has played into this, and it put us back a step as well. But we said, with the support we have at so many different levels, both financially and administratively right now, we have to move forward, because it's not just staff members that are waiting for this to happen. It's 3 to 5 year old children. And so I think that's why we're excited by this whole process.
Sorry, Mark. We were told today that there would be no blended braiding funding at all with the Strong Beginnings application. So is that something that you guys can work out? I mean, we do some inclusion in Midland, as you guys know, and we are just finding such a hole for 3-year-olds. I mean, we
Right.
just don't have anything for 3-year-olds. I mean, some Head Start spots. But so in all honesty, I think a lot of people were confused about that and this, and thinking there were some people coming on this call that thought they were on the other call, blah, blah, blah. And so I guess we just kind of need an answer, because I didn't, but someone else flat out asked the question, can we consider an inclusion classroom with 3-year-olds with the Strong Beginnings application? And it was a strong no.
So I have the same question, Michelle, as that. So would you mind, I don't know if you could follow up with us on if they're really meaning 54 funded programs, or, I mean, this would be a model for a Rule 55, but there would be FTE accrual. So I think that we probably need to check on that.
I looked at if I could just chime in, I looked at the link to the implementation manual that they had, and they're using pretty much the same language that they are for the 4-year-old GSRP, as far as children with IEPs, that if a child has an IEP that states that they would benefit from a full day, the full Strong Beginnings program, that they need to be given that prioritized enrollment. So, you know, that could be an opportunity. Again, you're not going to have, you know, a lot of kids in the program, but it does seem like there's that opportunity. And then of course there's kids who their families do financially qualify for a Strong Beginnings program, and the child happens to have a disability on top of it. So that could be another opportunity. So there may not be an official ability to blend a Strong Beginnings application with this application, but I think if, you know, that's something that is open to, you know, something, you know, going along those lines in the future, and it may not, I don't know, I'm thinking as the pilot project gets started, whether or not it would be a good idea as it's getting going to include this as a component of it when they're just getting that program off the ground to begin with. You might want to start with inclusion in an established program. I'm just weighing pros and cons in my head right now.
Christy, did you have something you wanted to say?
So I've been having conversations a lot about this very subject, and what I can say is that, yes, the implementation manual does indicate that children or a child with an IEP would be able to be included in the Strong Beginnings classroom. From an evaluation standpoint, there's a concern about maintaining a rigorous evaluation design so that there's a control group for every child that's in the classroom. There needs to be that control group. And so because children with IEPs, children with disabilities have to be served, there's the explanation that I received was that there's not a good control for that. And so they want to be careful. Yes, you can serve children, but I think they're really wanting to be careful about overrepresentation in the Strong Beginnings classroom and not too many children. So just know that we've been having that kind of conversation, and it's near and dear. I will say that there's great leadership right now at the department on this topic. And if ever we're going to move the needle, make systemic change, it's now. And we've been in some fantastic conversations with Dr. Kinishnecht. And I think all the leadership, you know, across the different offices is aligned. And I'm so excited as someone who's been kind of on the, a part of this conversation, part of different white paper writings and, you know, work groups over the years. I think this time is golden for us, and we will be able to make a change. But I appreciate the question, Michelle. I see there are a couple more in the chat, or maybe not. Okay, well, that's what we have for this afternoon. What a great opportunity again. We're pleased to be a part of it and to be able to partner with so many of you. I'd like to do a shout out to Jory Novak, who is also part of our project team here at Clinton County RESA. Thanks, Jory, for joining today. She'll be also one of our content experts, ICP, Inclusive Classroom coaches, so profile coaches. So thanks everybody. Yep. Thanks everybody for participating, for your interest. You know, it's because you're passionate. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye, see everybody.